Before we get started, I want to thank you for listening to Not Suitable for Work. If you haven't, take a quick second to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome to Not Suitable for Work. I'm your host, Peter C. Diamond. You think your office is nuts? Wait until you hear some of these stories.
It's a story I tell people as a cautionary tale of what not to do in a pressure-filled situation.
And there's nothing like making a joke and looking at a room full of people who, are just stone-faced, and they know that you blew it.
What about our professional dynamic has given you a license to act in this way?
We're driving, and it's taking a while, and I realize I don't think I'm going to be making it back to my hotel.
With each podcast, I interview folks who have a humorous work story to share. Along the way, I'll offer advice to help you make sense of your own office nonsense. Don't worry, no careers were harmed in making Not Suitable for Work. Names and places may have been changed to protect the not so innocent. Without further ado, let's get this show on the road. Even the best of us can be blinded by ego and ambition. While I would like to think it would never happen to me, it did. My guest is Steve Grosklaus, Executive Vice President and a data guru for a large global advertising agency. Steve and I have worked closely together for 15 years. I think it's fair to say we're decent human beings, but not without our foibles. About 10 years ago, Steve and I were thrown into a client project that was politically charged and littered with minefields. As co-conspirators, we had to navigate two camps within the client, one eager for change and the other determined to maintain the status quo. At this point in our careers, there was a lot at stake for Steve and myself. In one particular meeting with the opposition, we were so consumed with making the sale, we were unaware that something was amiss.
At that time in my career, I was kind of on the cusp of being promoted to the next level, to make EVP, which was certainly a goal of mine. In fact, I think you were as well, right? So it certainly never hurts, when you're nominated for EVP, to have a piece of new business that is important to somebody who's on the leadership committee who's going to be taking you into consideration for that promotion. So that certainly was in, I know, the back of my head. We needed this to work out.
We needed this to work out.
Right. And what's the word that, rainmaker?
Yeah.
Right.
No,
Right.
which, yeah. So
rainmaker, right? Is that what you
So I think that's
we were
like,
told?
hey, you have to, are you able to bring in new business? And yes, the term rainmaker would be bantied about for sure. As well as it was also kind of dangled as if you do this well, if you guys are successful with that, there could be benefits to you, if you will,
That's certainly in the back of your mind as you're going through these things. I think in an agency, it's kind of always there, but I think in this particular situation, it was
heightened because we knew we were in consideration. So when you're that close, you really don't want anything to get in the way of that promotion, because you get a parking spot, for heaven's sakes, and that's huge, right?
Parking.
Everyone wants the parking spot.
Exactly. Yeah. Bigger office, parking spot. So obviously, there's this kind of divide within the client. It's important for us career-wise, and so we had a meeting set up with one of the folks that was more on the not so much in our camp, to put it bluntly.
I think it's safe to say she was the opposition.
Yes, she was in the opposition. I think she was defensive. I think she had been there for a very long time in the organization. I think she was a little bit, defensive about some of the work that they had done. And now here comes this agency comes in and, they're going to tell them how to do things, et cetera. And so she's somewhat a little bit of a roadblock. And it was somebody that I know going into the meeting and just in talking about it with you, we really needed to get on board with us and make sure that, we kind of had her blessings in terms of the work that the agency was doing, in terms of selling in the new campaign, in terms of selling in a lot of the CRM and analytic work that we were doing. So it was a pretty important meeting. I can remember discussing with you on the walk over. It was close to where our offices were. We walked over there. We get to the client, and we're ushered into their office, and it is really very, very, very impressive in terms of kind of just the layout, the facilities. We're in this just very large office, very well decked out. In fact, it's a double couch office. I mean, it's which I found kind of interesting, and kind of set up where when we got there, we took a seat on the couch. And the client had like kind of an easy chair, which was kind of set up, I don't know, like a throne almost, or, really somewhat, I don't know, intimidating in a way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember the couches were set up almost like an L shape, yep. Right? So you took one, I took the other, right? So we were trying to almost, create a kind of a dispersed presence, and then she sat in what was kind of a large armchair, felt like a throne, right, because she was sitting up high and we were sunk in these couch cushions, yep. That made us feel even like smaller, right, compared to her. And it's also when you're trying to present a case, as we were, it's kind of hard to do that when you're sitting on a couch. It's not as if you're at a table and everyone is at the same level in an upright position. But when you're in a couch, it was also, I felt like we were at I clearly felt we were at a disadvantage.
Yes. No, absolutely. It would be better, small talk, chit chat's fine, but we've got work to do.
We had a mission.
Yes.
We had to come in. We had to leave that meeting with, kind of having convinced her with buy-in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so we're trying to bring our A game, and we start out, and basically the goal is really just to explain what we've done, what we're going to do, and just kind of get her more or less blessings, because we really, really needed that. And so, if I recall right, I think I started out in kind of, we did some introductions, pleasantries, and then I kind of jumped in and kind of started explaining what we were up to. And at that point, the work was good. I mean, we had done some, I think, pretty neat creative work, neat positioning. We had done some analytic work. We had done some analysis of their database. I mean, the work that we had done to date was interesting. So we had kind of I thought, a pretty strong story in terms of what the agency had already accomplished and where things were going and why we were the right partner for them, et cetera. So I probably spent, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes or so, kind of just explaining more or less what we were up to and why we were kind of the right partner. And then things got kind of odd, to say the least. And so the client got very, I'll say, almost like their speech kind of got really a little bit slurred, got a little, felt sleepy. Their eyes were kind of droopy, and they go, "Well, I really don't understand," and in a very slow kind of unusual voice, not in her normal voice. At which point I was like, well, I guess my 5 minutes didn't work very well in terms of me explaining what it was that we were up to. She doesn't seem to be getting it. So Peter, you gave it a shot.
Yeah, and at that point, I noticed that she was kind of like slouching a little bit to her right. But so I start trying to say the same thing that you said, but in a different way, to try and maybe think, okay, if she does not really understanding it, maybe if I say it this way, or if I position it slightly differently, she would understand it. Because, of course, we're taking her literally when she says, I don't understand. And so at that point, again, I probably try and talk for another 5 minutes or so. And then
she says the same thing. She goes, I'm not understanding, in a very kind of slow, kind of unusual voice. To which case then, and again, I'm just thinking, wow, we're really off here. So then I take another stab at it. So I probably go on for a little bit shorter, but maybe 2-3 minutes, and try to explain kind of what's happening and what's going on. And then something unusual happens, and they're in the chair, the client sitting in this throne, and like the pen drops out of her hand.
So like the pen and kind of her paper like her note paper, all falls. So I like jump over there and pick it up and hand it to her. And, again, I don't know what was kind of going through, my mind or our mind.
Well, I know what was going through your mind, because you tried again to explain it to her, but for the 4th time.
Well, I kind of was thinking, like, is this some weird power play? I mean, I knew, because because our recommendation in particular, and the reason why we were talking to her kind of one-on-one, is a lot of what we were doing was going to impact her in her role and her team and her position. So I'm thinking of, I don't know if are familiar with the book 48 Laws of Power.
Of course, the green book.
I'm like thinking about, is this one of those, like, is this one of those power plays that you throw someone off by
some technique
by
tactic,
like looking, disengaged, or I mean, it just goes to I was so in that mindset. I was just so in the moment and blinded by what we were trying to do, that I'm thinking of, okay, this is like some weird power play. Like, she's positioned herself in this way. She's kind of acting this way to really throw us off our game. And that's and here the two of us are banting back and forth, trying to
all
figure
I can do
out,
is focus on, okay, what should I be saying differently to convince her that we're the right ones, and like there's got to be another approach or angle. It's funny that you thought, my thinking at that point was, wow, is this a train wreck? and at some point in some meetings, you just get to a place where you say, well, regardless of what happens, I know I'm gonna be able to walk out the door and just the meeting will end at some point, because man, this is really not going very well.
And I kind of think after a couple of minutes, a couple more minutes after that, like I'm trying to think at what point did I
think we just kind of got up and left.
I think we were just like, okay, well, thank you for your time. And she never got up.
No, she didn't get up.
So she didn't get up.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of put our tails between our legs and just kind of
we just left.
We just walked out.
Right. Yeah. And I'm thinking on the way out, well, this is going to be a problem. We didn't, this is just going to be a problem. And so we, we're going back to the office, and we weren't talking a whole lot, because I think we were both kind of just a little bit stunned by the whole thing. And then we're walking back. I remember the exact moment, because we were right over the Chicago River on the Clark Street Bridge. And I can't remember if it was you said it or I said, maybe you said, you go, I wonder if she's feeling well. Okay. And I think it was like, it's like the scales fell from our eyes, and we were like, oh, like something's not right, like physically, or there's something medically wrong, or like when you kind of looked at it through that lens, then stuff made more sense. And we were like, wow, we should probably do something about this. And so we got back to the office.
Which thankfully at that point is like another 2 more minutes.
Right.
Like we were close. Like really close.
Yeah. And we were closer to the office than we were to go back to the client. And I called one of the kind of day-to-day clients who was a little bit more in our camp. She was definitely
in our camp. Yeah.
And I just said, hey, we met, and she had known we were meeting. We met, didn't go all that well. I said, but can you just check on her, just because Peter and I think that maybe she's not feeling well, or something's kind of up. And so she it was a little bit of an odd ask, but she hung up, and then and she called me back about 10 minutes later and said, "Hey, thank you. It really was kind of a medical condition, certainly medical condition, if not emergency, and her admin was able to do the right things to kind of get her back, healthy again."
Yeah.
And so it all worked out in that sense, but it just never while we were in that room, because we were so focused on convincing this client that we were the right ones, with all the politics behind why that was important, our personal issues individually as to why that was important, that here in front of us we have somebody who's in kind of a medical emergency, and we keep trying to just make the sale. And then finally, when we realize, well, it doesn't look like we're going to make the sale, we just
leave.
We just left.
Leave her.
Right.
And yeah, it was so, it still kind of baffles me, because I just, to this day, I'm like, how could we have really missed that badly? And other than it was just, kind of, I guess it just goes to show you, we were so consumed with everything else. We didn't see what was happening right in front of us.
Yeah. I think there's a lesson in that,
yeah.
That you lose kind of that, what's this really all about? And it goes beyond just the sale of an ad agency. And I think I don't know, but it happens.
Yeah. And so what happened with her?
Yeah. She ended up not being there much longer. So it turned out in retrospect not to be that individual turned out not to be that big of an issue for us. We did get caught up in all the other politics.
The rest of the politics took us down.
Yes,
but
yeah.
Yeah, I think it was one of those afterward. I think there was another meeting I was in with her, and it was never spoken, never addressed. I think it's probably something that she had to manage and deal with. But it was interesting how at the end it wasn't. There were other things that ended up being. Kind of the demise of the relationship.
This particular account.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's just one of those things where you just say, you become so focused, so entrenched with your goal, that sometimes you just miss incredibly obvious things that are happening. And, I feel a little bit okay about it, because you were there too, and you had the same kind of reaction that I did. So, but it's just do your job, sell, make stuff happen, and you just kind of lose sight of things. And I think that's, for me anyway, that's the lesson. Because in 25 years in this business, there's a lot of water under the bridge in terms of client meetings and unusual things and oddities. And this particular meeting is number one on the list in terms of unusual kind of meetings and things that happen within a meeting.
Yeah. All right. Steve Grosklaus, thank you for being on Not Suitable for Work.
Always a pleasure, Peter. Thanks.
Thankfully, once we got out of the office and inhaled fresh air, we quickly came to our senses and took action. But in that meeting, it was like we were both stuck in a loop. We were so locked into persuading her to buy into our recommendation, we lost sight of the person sitting across from us, who was clearly in distress. I'm embarrassed to say, in that moment, it never occurred to me to ask her if she was feeling all right or if there was anything she needed. I was too busy thinking of how to recover from this meeting and what we were going to do next. Thankfully, her trusty assistant rushed to her rescue. Focusing on business is important, but your drive, ambition, and ego should never overshadow the need and responsibility to care about the well-being of others. If you want more Not Suitable for Work or have a work story to share, be sure to follow us on Facebook at Not Suitable for Work. You can find our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts. If you have a question you want answered on a future episode, call us at 872-256-0827. I'm Peter C. Diamond. You can follow me on Twitter at Peter C. Diamond. Not Suitable for Work is produced by Matt Cunningham at Truthful Enthusiasm. Get your story online with truthfulenthusiasm.com. Until next time.